On the Constitution. I spent a little bit more time on the Constitution than other history instructors. So I guess you just won the lottery on that. Let's move on. Let's see what we got. First of all, what is a Constitution? Um, each and every one of y'all and I and just everybody's got a Constitution. Now, as you're pondering that, I'd like to remind you that I did not say that everybody has a Constitution that's written down and all that kind of good stuff. But we each have a set of principles that we live by. I mean, don't we? So we each have our own Constitution. But let's move on into a government setting. The set of principles is established, and that does include the people's philosophy on governance, how government works, how its purpose, what are its limitations. Of course, that varies from country to country or what have you. Our Constitution, by the way, it's the shortest Constitution in the world. It's the longest living Constitution in the world as well. Maybe there's a moral to that story. Our Constitution is made up of 7 articles or 7 parts. They called them articles, back in the day. It's 1787 to be precise. First 3 articles lay out your 3 branches of government: legislative, executive, judicial. You can read. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to read for you. And then the rest of the Constitution, guidelines for the states to follow, for us to follow as far as how to change this Constitution to meet our changing world, the amendment process, and then odds and ends in Article 6. And 7 is how this document is going to be ratified, how it's going to be officially accepted as the official government for the United States. Legislative branch, this will be a little civics class for y'all for the next minute or two. Branch that makes the law. That's what legislate means. To legislate means to make the law. Legislative means the authority or the power, having the power to make the law. Of course, our legislature is divided up into, it is a Congress divided up into 2 houses. Now, you and I don't ever say House of Senators, but I just put it there for effect. Article 2 lays out your executive branch, establishing the presidency. This is the branch that enforces the law, carries out the law. This is the trigger person, if you will, the person who makes it go, enforces or carries out the law. Of course, that's the president, and he has at his disposal, constitutionally, the vice president, and the Constitution refers to what becomes known as executive departments. And all the heads of those executive departments come together and make up the cabinet. Here we go. And but back to enforcing the law. It's up to the chief executive to make sure that a law is being carried out. The governor of Utah will quickly remind everyone that they do not allow polygamy in Utah. It is against state law. But every talk magazine show in the world can go find a man with, 7 wives or something. That's a matter of enforcement, I guess. back to the presidential level, look at Obama and the marijuana situation. So there's something there that, Obama could enforce that law, absolutely. Absolutely he could. He chooses not to. Let's move on. Oh, by the way, executive departments. Divide the president's job up. Those are departments. Foreign affairs, that's part of his job. Well, you got the State Department. National finances, that comes under the president's job. Okay, he's got the Treasury Department. And just the list goes on and on and on. The Defense Department. Obviously, what we did after WW2 is combined all the military into one executive department called the Defense Department. The last department created is Homeland Security, Executive Department of Homeland Security. Judicial branch, the court system. There's your breakdown. These trial courts, these 94 districts, those are courts of original jurisdiction, which means that's the trial court. That's where a case originally goes. Now, once that verdict is rendered, then it can be appealed on constitutional grounds. You can't appeal because you just didn't like the verdict. But I'm innocent. Well, that doesn't cut it. You got to have a constitutional reason for appealing. Then it goes from the trial courts into an appellate court, one of the circuits. And then if it gets appealed further, it goes to the final appellate court, which is the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court also has original jurisdiction in cases involving government officials and the like. All right, if you think about governments, you know that governments have three powers. They make laws, they enforce laws, and they administer justice. No matter what government we're talking about, our government, U.S., Kentucky, all of it. Well, Hitler's government, Attila the Hun, whoever, government for BCTC student organizations or student government, any kind of government, they make laws, they enforce laws, and they administer justice. That's what they do. Everything they do falls under those three categories. What we do here, our authors, separated those powers so that you don't have a Hitler situation where he can, he had a law. Yeah, he had some law about the Jews, and he damn sure enforced it. I didn't say all governments are fair. They make, they enforce, they administer. To keep us from having a potential Hitler type situation, Saddam Hussein, whatever, you separate the powers, and the lawmakers are not the law enforcers, and neither are your administrators of justice. In-house process of assuring constitutionality, checks and balances. President POTUS, President of the United States. Just a few examples right there for you. The big whammies at the bottom, ain't it? Congress's check on the other two branches is impeachment. Okay, Article 4 gets into relationship with the states, and you got full faith and credit clause right there. Now, what's good in one has to be respected in others. Full faith and credit will be given by each state to the judicial acts, the legislative proceedings, and the records of all other states. Judicial proceedings, that's court cases. Legislative acts is laws, and records are records, like marriage records or whatever. Full faith and credit clause. You don't have to have the same law, but you have to respect another state to have those laws that are different from yours. Extradition goes hand in hand with that. This just has to do with the criminal. You can't break the law in Kentucky and make it to Tennessee and say, we're here, No, it doesn't work that way. We got extradition amongst the states. That criminal will be sent back. You hear about these Nazi war doctors or whatever who run off to Argentina or someplace that does not have extradition agreements with the United States. So they make it there. They can stay beyond the long arm of the law, but not if there's an extradition agreement in place. And then the rest of it we'll get to in detail in due time. Article 5, this amendment process, 2/3 of the states or both houses, 3/4 of the states to ratify. Notice there is no Congress in the ratification of an amendment. You cannot allow Congress to change the Constitution. They'd be changing their own rule book. We're not going to let that happen. So changes to the Constitution can only be made by state action, never from the National Congress. National Congress can propose an amendment, but they cannot ratify the amendment. It has to be done from the state level at either a convention called for that purpose or by a legislative act. But it has to be done at state level. And 3/4 of the states have to do it, have to agree to it. Supreme law of the land, of course, Constitution, but also the laws and the treaties made. Self-explanatory, I think, the rest of the way. There's your ratification. Only 9 was required. A little thing you might not know is that we had only 12 states in attendance. So whereas it's going to take 75% of the states to ratify an amendment, I believe in my heart that your authors of the Constitution said it's going to take 75% of us here knowing that Rhode Island is not in attendance and Rhode Island is not going to vote. So, and if you don't vote, it's a no vote. So they only, by realistically saying, okay, there's only 12 states available to vote, really, and 3/4 of that's 9, so I don't know, I think that's how they got that. Here's a little summation of your first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, and you can refer back to that. I mean, the First Amendment, my gosh, there's 5 freedoms protected, actually 6, but 2 of them have to do with religion, so you kind of. And Amendments 11 through 27, another day. I hope you enjoy the class, a little introduction to the Constitution, and I'll be back in touch. Check the announcements. Later.